Hi there, it's Elizabeth. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to start a new series and I'm going to start doing readings. I'm going to start with a David Sedaris book, When You Are Engulfed in Flames. David Sedaris is a humorist, essayist, a grand observer of life and its oddities, and he has a fantastic way of telling the stories in his essays. I thought they would be fun to share. I won't be reading the entire books, but I will select some essays from this particular book. And maybe I will move on to either another author or do some more David Sedaris if you guys like it. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The title of this essay is In the Waiting Room. I will warn you there are a couple of French words in here that I am sure I will butcher. Please forgive me in advance. 6 months after moving to Paris, I gave up on French school and decided to take the easy way out. All I ever said was, "Could you repeat that?" And for what? I rarely understood things a second time around, and when I did, it was usually something banal. The speaker wondering how I felt about toast or tell me that the store would close in 20 minutes. All that work for something that didn't really matter. So I began saying d'accord, which translates to I am in agreement and means basically okay. The word was a key to a magic door, and every time I said it, I felt the thrill of possibility. D'accord, I told the concierge, and the next thing I knew, I was sewing the eye onto a stuffed animal belonging to her granddaughter. D'accord, I said to the dentist, and she sent me to a periodontist who took some x-rays and called me into his conference room for a little talk. D'accord, I said, and a week later I returned to his office where he sliced my gums from top to bottom and scraped great deposits of plaque from the roots of my teeth. If I'd had any idea that this was going to happen, I'd never have said d'accord to my French publisher who'd scheduled me the following evening for a television appearance. It was a weekly cultural program and very popular. I followed the pop star Robbie Williams, and as the producer settled me into my chair, I ran my tongue over my stitches. It was like having a mouthful of spiders. Spooky, but it gave me something to talk about on TV, and for that I was grateful. I said d'accord to a waiter and received a pig's nose standing erect on a bed of tender greens. I said it to a woman in a department store and walked away drenched in cologne. Every day was an adventure. When I got a kidney stone, I took the metro to a hospital and said d'accord to a cheerful red-headed nurse who led me to a private room and hooked me up to a Demerol drip. That was undoubtedly the best that d'accord got me, and it was followed by the worst. After the stone had passed, I spoke to a doctor who filled out an appointment card and told me to return the following Monday, when we would do whatever it was I just agreed to. D'accord, I said, and then I supersized it with the génial, which means great. On the day of my appointment, I returned to the hospital, where I signed the register, and I was led by a slightly less cheerful nurse to a large dressing room. "Strip to your underwear," she told me. And I said, d'accord. As the woman turned to leave and she said something else, and looking back, I really should have asked her to repeat it, to draw a picture if that's what it took, because once you take your pants off, decor isn't really okay anymore. There were 3 doors in the dressing room, and after removing my clothes, I put my ear against each one, trying to determine which was the safest for someone in my condition. The first was loud with lots of ringing telephones, so that was out. And the second didn't sound much different, and so I chose a third and entered a brightly painted waiting room set with plastic chairs and a glass-topped coffee table stacked high with magazines. A potted plant stood in the corner, and beside it was a second door which was open and led into a hallway. I took a seat and had been there for a minute or so when a couple came in and filled 2 of the unoccupied chairs. The first thing I noticed was that they were fully dressed and nicely too, no sneakers or sweatsuits for them. The woman wore a nubby gray skirt that fell to her knees and matched the fabric of her husband's sport coat. Their black hair, which was obviously dyed, formed another match but looked better on her than it did on him. Less vain, I supposed. Bonjour, I said. It occurred to me that possibly the nurse had mentioned something about a robe, perhaps the one that had been hanging in the dressing room. I wanted more than anything to go back and get it, but if I did, the couple would see my mistake. They'd think I was stupid, so to prove them wrong, I decided to remain where I was and pretend that everything was normal. La la la. It's funny the things that run through your mind when you're sitting in your underpants in front of a pair of strangers. Suicide comes up, but just as you embrace it as a viable option, you remember that you don't have the proper tools. No belt to wrap around your neck, no pen to drive through your nose or ear and up into your brain. I thought briefly of swallowing my watch, but there was no guarantee I'd choke on it. And it's embarrassing, but given the way I normally eat, it probably would go down fairly easily, strap and all. A clock might be a challenge, but a Timex the size of a 50-cent piece? No problem. The man with the dyed black hair pulled a pair of glasses from his jacket pocket, and as he unfolded them, I recalled a summer evening in my parents' backyard. This was ages ago, at dinner for my sister Gretchen's 10th birthday. My father grilled steaks. My mother set the picnic table with insect-repelling candles, and just as we started to eat, she caught me chewing a hunk of beef the size of a coin purse. Gorging always set her off, but on this occasion it bothered her more than usual. "I hope you choked to death," she said. I was 12 years old, and paused thinking, did I hear her correctly? That's right, piggy, suffocate. In that moment, I hoped I would choke to death. The knot of beef would lodge itself in my throat, and for the rest of her life, my mother would feel haunted and responsible. Every time she passed a steakhouse or browsed the meat counter of a grocery store, she would think of me and reflect upon what she had said. The words hope and death in the same sentence. But of course I hadn't choked. Instead, I had lived to adulthood so that I could sit in this waiting room dressed in nothing but my underpants. La la la. It was around this time that two more people entered. The woman looked to be in her mid-50s and accompanied an elderly man who was, if anything, overdressed. A suit, a sweater, a scarf, and an overcoat, which he removed with great difficulty, every button a challenge. Give it to me, I thought. Over here. But he was deaf to my telepathy and handed his coat to the woman, who folded it over the back of her chair. Our eyes met for a moment, hers widening as they moved from my face to my chest, and then she picked a magazine off the table and handed it to the elderly man, who I now took to be her father. She then selected a magazine of her own, and as she turned the pages, I allowed myself to relax a little. She was just a woman reading a copy of the Paris Match, and I was just the person sitting across from her. True, I had no clothes on, but maybe she wouldn't dwell on that. Maybe none of these people would. The old man, the couple with the matching hair. How was the hospital, their friends might ask, and they'd say, fine, or, the same. Did you see anything effed up? No, not that I could think of. It sometimes helps to remind myself that not everyone is like me. Not everyone writes things down in a notebook and then transcribes them into a diary. Fewer still will take that diary, clean it up a bit, and read it in front of an audience. March 14th, Paris. Went with Dad to the hospital where we sat across from a man in his underpants. They were briefs, not boxers, a little gray on the side, the elastic slack from too many washings. I later said to Father, other people have to use those chairs too, and he agreed that it was unsanitary. Odd little guy, creepy, hair on his shoulders, big idiot smiles plastered on his face, just sitting there mumbling to himself. How conceited I am to think I might be remembered, especially in a busy hospital where human misery is a matter of course. If any of these people did keep a diary, their day's entry would likely have to do with a diagnosis, some piece of news either inconvenient or life-altering. The liver's not a match. The cancer has spread to his spinal column. Compared with that, a man in his underpants is no more remarkable than a dust-covered plant or the magazine subscription card lying on the floor beside the table. Then, too, good news or bad, these people would eventually leave the hospital and return to the street, where any number of things might wipe me from their memory. Perhaps on their way home they'll see a dog with a wooden leg, which I saw myself one afternoon. It was a German Shepherd, and his prosthesis looked as though it had been fashioned from a billy club. The network of straps holding the thing in place was a real eye-opener, but stranger still was the noise it made against the floor of the subway car, a dull thud that managed to sound both plaintive and forceful at the same time. Then there was the dog's owner, who looked at the homemade leg and then at me with an expression reading, "Not bad, huh?" Or maybe they'll run into something comparatively small, yet no less astonishing. I was walking to the bus stop one morning and came upon a well-dressed woman lying on the sidewalk in front of an office supply store. A small crowd had formed, and just as I joined it, a fire truck pulled up. In America, if someone dropped to the ground, you'd call an ambulance, but in France, it's the firemen who do most of the rescuing. There were 4 of them, and after checking to see that the woman was okay, one of them returned to the truck and opened the door. I thought he was looking for an aluminum blanket, the type they use for people in shock, but instead he pulled out a goblet. Anywhere else it would have been a cup made of paper or plastic, but this was glass and had a stem. I guess they carry it around in the front seat next to the axes or whatever. The fireman filled the goblet with bottled water, and then he handed it to the woman, who was sitting up now and running her hand over her hair, the way one might when waking up from a nap. It was the lead story in my diary that night, but no matter how hard I fiddled with it, I felt like something was missing. Had I mentioned that it was autumn? Did the leaves on the sidewalk contribute to my sense of utter delight, or was it just the goblet and the dignity it bespoke? Yes, you may be on the ground. Yes, this drink may be your last, but let's do it right, shall we? Everyone has his own standards, but in my opinion, a sight like that is at least 50 times better than what I was providing. A goblet will keep you going for years, while a man in his underpants is good for maybe 2 days, a week at most. Unless, of course, you are the man in his underpants, in which case it will probably stay with you for the rest of your life. Not floating on the exact edge of your consciousness, not handy like a phone number, but still within easy reach, like a mouthful of steak or a dog with a wooden leg. How often you'll think of that cold plastic chair and the nurse's face as she passes the room and discovers you with your hands between your knees. Such surprise, such amusement, as she proposes some new adventure, then stands there waiting for your decor. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments below. Bye for now.